Story 1. The Blackout on the Deserted Road. It was a typical night for Carlos, an experienced truck driver who spent most of his life on the road. He was driving along a remote route, cutting through a secluded stretch of the Brazilian countryside. The radio was tuned to a news station, but the signal was weak, and the darkness seemed to swallow everything around him. His only companions were the truck's headlights, illuminating the road and the engine's hum. Suddenly, everything went black. The truck's engine died, the radio went silent, and the lights shut off. Carlos froze, taking a deep breath to stave off panic. It wasn't the first time he had faced mechanical issues, but something about this situation felt different. The absolute silence was overwhelming, interrupted only by the sound of the wind rustling through the bushes. He stepped out of the truck with a flashlight in hand, but noticed the battery was nearly drained. As he shone the light around, he realized there were no power poles or other vehicles in sight. Then he noticed the most unsettling detail. The sky was completely black. There were no stars, not even the moon. It was as if a veil had been draped over the world. As Carlos tried to make sense of what was happening, he heard footsteps coming from the brush beside the road. "Who's there?" he shouted, trying to sound confident, but his voice wavered. No one responded. He quickly turned to the other side upon hearing more footsteps, but saw nothing. His heart began to race. Moments later, the footsteps grew more frequent, as if something or someone was circling him. The fear was paralyzing, but he knew he couldn't just stand there. He ran back to the truck, but when he tried to start the engine, nothing happened. The dashboard was dead. He began pounding the steering wheel, pleading for the truck to start. Then he saw something in the rearview mirror he would never forget. A tall, thin figure with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce directly into his soul. The figure didn't move, but its presence was oppressive. He quickly turned around, but there was nothing there. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure was closer. Desperate, Carlos pressed the horn forcefully. The sound shattered the night's silence, but seemed to have no effect. He grabbed a metal bar from the truck and stepped out, ready to face whatever it was. But as he set foot on the ground, the figure was right in front of him. Before he could react, everything went black again. When he woke up, he was in the same spot, but the truck was functioning normally, and the sky was clear. He could never explain what happened that night, but from then on, he avoided that road at all costs. Story 2. The Blackout in the Abandoned Building. Camilla and her friends had a tradition of exploring abandoned places. It was an adrenaline rush none of them could resist, and that night, the chosen destination was an old building in the city center, abandoned for decades. People said it had been the scene of macabre events, but for them, it was just another exciting challenge. The group of 5 friends entered the building with flashlights and phones in hand. The peeling walls and the smell of mildew created a heavy atmosphere. At first, everything seemed normal, except for a few eerie graffiti messages that read things like, "Don't go into the dark," and "They are here." As they explored the upper floors, something strange happened. All the lights from their flashlights and phones began to flicker. One by one, the devices shut off, plunging the group into total darkness. "It must be some magnetic field or electrical interference," Lucas said, trying to sound rational, but his tone betrayed his nervousness. Suddenly, sounds began echoing through the building. Whispers, hurried footsteps, and something that sounded like distant laughter. The group froze, trying to pinpoint where the noises were coming from, but they seemed to come from everywhere. Camilla grabbed the arm of her best friend Anna, but noticed something strange. Anna was trembling, her eyes fixed on a point ahead. "Do you see that?" Anna whispered, pointing down a hallway. At the end of the corridor, a faint light seemed to pulse, as if someone were holding a candle. The light drew them in, and without saying a word, the group started walking toward it, as if hypnotized. When they reached the end of the corridor, they found a circular room with candles arranged in a strange pattern on the floor. In the center was an old chair, and sitting on it, a porcelain doll with black eyes. As soon as they entered the room, the candles went out, and the door behind them slammed shut. Panic set in. They began pounding on the door, screaming for help, but no sound seemed to escape. Then the doll started laughing, a low, sinister laugh that echoed through the room. The candlelight reignited on its own, but now the walls were covered with phrases written in what looked like blood. "You will not leave." One by one, the friends began disappearing into the darkness. Camilla tried to hold on to Anna, but felt her hand being yanked away by an invisible force. Within seconds, she was alone in the room. The doll slowly turned its head to face her, and Camilla fainted. When she woke up, she was outside the building with no sign of her friends. When she reported the incident to the police, they said the building had been abandoned for over 40 years and there was no way anyone could have been inside. To this day, Camilla is haunted by the doll's laughter and its black eyes, which appear in her dreams.